I met you at your GK house and I was going to talk to you about your golf links house because I was splashed all over the newspapers last year.
This is actually old. I bought the house almost a year ago.
You're saying the journalist was sleeping on the job because it took them so long. RateGain, bit of a phenomena. Stock made a bottom of what, 237 after listing, and last I checked, it was on the other side of 800.
अगर stock price देखूंगा तो काम कब करूंगा?
Right.
So really the focus is on just going in every day, making a difference.
For entrepreneurs who might be watching this show,
Yeah.
how does one decide that the idea that you once believed in so much, you need to completely change it?
I think it's very hard. You have to have some sort of emotional detachment to the idea. And that's very hard to achieve because as an entrepreneur, you always feel like it's your baby and you never want to give up.
Right.
And I think pivoting is not giving up.
The company has the word gain in its name. So some on social media have been arguing, it's no surprise, it continues to print money for employees, promoters, and shareholders. But what's been a bit of a mystery is the man running the show. Hello and welcome. You're watching Rolling with the Boss, and I'm Abhishek Singh. For those of you who've still not managed to guess, we're talking about RateGain. Since listing in December 2021, the company has quadrupled in value. Let's go and talk to the CEO and founder Bhanu Chopra and find out what makes him and RateGain tick. Thank you for this, for agreeing to this. I've been trying to sort of, talk to people to sort of, understand what Mr. Chopra is all about, which is something I always do before I walk in for an interview. But there's not much that people could tell me. So I'm hoping we'll figure all of that out in the car. So should we get going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this how your day typically starts, Mr. Chopra?
Yeah, it's usually a late start because I usually have late evenings because of calls with the US, given we're a global company, etc. And I wake up in the morning, spend some time with my son before he's off to school, and then usually do my workout. Either I go for a run or I will be at home and my trainer comes over. And yeah, so it's usually a late start.
Right. How old is your son?
So I have two boys. One is 19 and the other one is 12.
You get to spend some time with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to believe, I always joke with my wife as well that, I feel like I've had a very, very good balance in two aspects of my life, which is work as well as, the family side, because I've been able to do justice to both. But there are other facets in life which I feel like, I could have done more, but no complaints.
Right. And what are those facets, by the way?
So I feel like, I'm a pretty social guy. I travel quite a bit. And as a result of work and family commitments, I feel like I don't get as much time to spend with my friends, etc. and like extended family. So I think that's sort of like a big sore point. But other than that, I feel pretty good about, all other aspects of the life.
Right. Is it a big Punjabi extended family?
Yeah, it is a big Punjabi extended family, especially on my father's side. But, given the lifestyles that we have, it's just been hard, trying to like be there for everybody that you want to be there for. Like I have a group of friends that I grew up with, my school friends, my colony friends, and then, friends that I made in school, in college, and because I went to US to study. And as a matter of fact, I had a lot of Pakistani friends, and they actually have visited me as well.
Right.
And then I made friends once I was in the US, I was working there, I was studying there. So just this whole social aspect of it has been very important to me, but I feel like I haven't done great amount of justice, to being in touch with everybody that I want to be with.
That is a trade-off because you're running a
Yeah.
very successful company in a matter of 2 years since the company got listed.
Yeah.
The stock's doing very well.
Yeah.
That's one thing which I'm sure the viewers are going to be sort of, very keenly listening to everything that
Yeah.
we talk about this stock, related to this stock. But that's perhaps for later. Tell us a little bit about your college days because there's not much known about your college days.
Yeah. So I'm a Delhi boy, grew up here, and my dad was pretty keen that I should spend my time in the US and actually get my bachelor's degree in the US. So he was the one who actually pushed me to go out and get a degree. So I went to Indiana University.
Yes.
And actually prior to that I went to another college, University of Massachusetts. So, and it wasn't a very large Indian contingent there, but somehow there was a very large Pakistani contingent. And I just, there's a huge connect because ultimately I'm a North Indian, and the Pakistanis, they're north, from the north as well, and they're
Everybody speaks Punjabi.
everybody speaks Punjabi. The food culture is very similar to us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent a great degree of time with them, and
Yeah.
got to know them very, very well
Right.
during such time, and it and built some lifelong friendships with them.
Once you were done with your education, you started working as a consultant, you even worked for a startup, you decided to come back to India and start RateGain. So tell us a little bit about those days.
Yeah, so when I graduated, my first job was with Deloitte Consulting. So I was doing large systems integration projects. At that time, what was happening was in the tech space, they were different softwares that you bought for different functions, for HR, for finance, for manufacturing, for operations, etc. And there was a rage to consolidate all these modules into one big platform that was referred to as ERP. So my first job was actually doing ERP systems integration projects at very large companies, at Fortune 500 companies. So I had the luxury of meeting some very, very senior C-level staff, talking about these transformation projects that were a game changer for these companies. So, I was very fortunate to get an opportunity to work in this space earlier on. And I would say that was a huge learning experience. And so my first job was with Deloitte. I traveled quite a bit, and then I started another company. I started working for another company, which was actually founded by ex-Deloitte partners,
Right.
which did extremely well as well. This was I don't know if you're aware of the famous, .com days.
Right. of
So
course.
yeah, so it was during such time where
Yeah.
pets.com was valued at $1 billion, and
$1
everybody was starting out a company.
Yeah.
So this was the time when I joined this startup, and we were doing systems integration projects on very large CRM systems, and post that, I had an opportunity to tie up with one of my colleagues, and we started our own company,
Right.
our own consulting firm, because
Yeah, because I look at your LinkedIn page,
yeah,
what jumps out is the fact that the decisions that you seem to have made in your career
Yeah.
as a professional and then later on as an entrepreneur, everything seems so clinical.
yeah.
You study in the US, then you start working, as a consultant, then you start your own startup. So everything was eventually building up to get you where you are today.
Abhishek, I'll share one more thing,
Yeah.
that I come from a business background.
Right.
So, my father was an entrepreneur, my grandfather was an entrepreneur, my uncle was an entrepreneur. So I feel like
It wasn't a choice.
Being an entrepreneur was always in my DNA. In fact, the fact that my father, although he had a very good real estate business here, but he always knew, growing up, I was very fond of computers.
Yeah.
Like I was in class 7, I was taking computer classes because they didn't teach computers in school at that time. So I was learning computers when with college kids.
Right.
And I always had this thing that I wanted to do something with software, with computers, and I was very good at math. So it was always going to be something in tech and always going to be an entrepreneur. So I started something in the US. It did reasonably well, but at that point I was also, at a junction when I said that I'd spent about a decade in the US. I wanted to come back to India. 2004 is when I decided to come back to India, and I had this idea because I used to travel quite a bit, given the fact that I was a consultant, that I want to build a price comparison website, right? Which would actually help you get the best deals. Because I was always going on different websites and trying to find the best deal.
Yeah.
So that's how RateGain started. We were, very similar to like an Ixigo or a Kayak or a Trivago, where we were finding the best deals. But I realized very, very quickly that it would be hard to have like a, consumer site for the US based out of India.
Yeah.
So that's how we pivoted and became from B2C to B2B, where we would license this price comparison technology.
Pivoting is one thing which I really want to talk to you about, because the pivot that you made, within 2 years, the company turned profitable.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to pivoting, for entrepreneurs who might be watching this show, how does one decide that the idea that you once believed in so much, the vision that you had for the company, which you felt so strongly about, you need to completely change it and switch to another thing altogether? How do you make that decision?
So I think it's very hard, but you have to have some sort of emotional detachment to the idea, and that's very hard to achieve, because as an entrepreneur you always feel like it's your baby, and you never want to give up.
Right.
And I think pivoting is not giving up, right? It's just altering the path. And I think you sort of would know it in your gut if whatever path that you're pursuing, if it's meeting. I mean, I always start up, of course we've gotten a lot better over the years, and now, we have proper teams that would do the business analysis and build a proper plan, and we just, test and learn and determine where all are we winning, where are we failing, and then iterate through the process. But earlier on as well, you need to have a plan, and you need to identify, a pilot for the plan, just to make sure that you're not going all in, and define what is the success criteria of that pilot. And if you don't even achieve, a small win through the pilot, I mean, that's an indication in itself that, there is some amount of pivoting that's required. And sometimes it's not pivoting, it's iteration. So it's a fine balance of between pivoting, iterating, and staying on course. But as entrepreneurs, like I said, you have to have a little bit of an emotional detachment, to be able to make sensible, logical business calls.
So your baby, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for the baby.
Yes.
Even if it means the original plan is not going to work out, so be it. You'll make another plan. All right. Now talking about RateGain, you're back in India, and the decision was based on, of course, the successes and the little failures that you'd faced in the US. But once you were back in India, you were always sure that this is what you're going to do, and Delhi is going to be the place where you're going to work out of, because all the IT services company were in Bangalore at that point in time, and still are, most of them. So why did you pick Delhi?
Well, Delhi was home. I mean, that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
I mean, they were initially some thoughts of, perhaps moving to Bangalore and Mumbai.
Yeah.
But I dismissed those thoughts very, very quickly. Reason being, when you're trying to start a company, it itself is a mountain of an effort.
Sure.
To get going, and I just didn't want, having to deal with having another the challenge of settling in a new environment, adapting to a new environment.
Right.
So it, you just want to, when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to, really build something valuable, you have to figure out ways of, diminishing or eliminating items that are not as important.
Right.
So I just didn't want to struggle with, finding a home, setting it up, adapting to a new place, adapting to a new social environment. Because as it is, there was enough on the plate. And, Delhi is where I grew up. My whole social support structure is here.
So Delhi was an obvious choice.
Delhi was an obvious choice.
All right. Once you're in Delhi, you've started your business. This is also around the time you got married.
That's correct.
Right. So tell us a little bit about that. Where did you meet your wife? And was it an arranged marriage or was it a love arranged marriage? What kind of a marriage was it?
Yeah, or you can say arranged love marriage.
Arranged love marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was in the US, and my parents were obviously very, very keen to get me settled because they felt like I was alone, etc. But obviously I had grander plans of coming back to India as well.
Right.
So I think it stemmed from the need of, let's settle the son, which is like the typical Punjabi household way also. And so my parents got me introduced to a few people. Then I met my wife. We dated each other for some time, but it was pretty quick. I came on one trip to India, met her a few times. Then I went back, and it's funny. I was wanting to meet her more. I took the same flight back.
Okay.
As soon as I landed.
Yeah.
So that I could spend more time. And then I spent another month here, and then it was very quick. It was
a month-long courtship, and you get
it was maybe like a couple of months because then I was back in the US after that, and then and I think like 4-5 months or maybe max 6 months. We were married.
And what are her areas of focus?
So in the initial days, she was involved. So I had her, participate on the marketing side in terms of go to market. I was visiting the US, so she would accompany me. Unfortunately, on one of those trips, we ran into a car accident, which was very, very terrible, and she was pregnant at that time. And as a result of all of that, she took a pause, and we focused on her recovery, etc. And once she recovered, and we had my first son at the time, and then so she was kind of involved post that, but she got more formally involved after we listed. So she sits on the board.
Right.
She's sort of the chair of the CSR committee. So we now actively participate in sort of giving back, in helping sort of build communities, etc. So there is that initiative as a family, as part of RateGain. So what we are doing is we basically finding, these slums where, where kids, their nutrition is an issue. So helping out with meals, but more importantly, helping find teachers and finding areas where these kids can be taught.
Right.
So we've tied up with this organization called the Little India Foundation, and we, are very actively involved with Harsimar, who sort of leads that in, in helping kids around nutrition and education. She's usually in charge, and she can talk more about it.
Of course.
Given the fact that she's sort of heading it now.
So I think the next interview is going to be with her about all of those things. With that said, Delhi, I mean, you've been a Delhi boy, grew up here, studied here before you went to US, and of course settled down here. How has Delhi changed in your opinion back from those days and now?
Oh my God. I think there's like a sea change, in terms of just the whole cosmopolitan feel of the place, right? I mean, look at the infrastructure now. I know a lot of people complain about the infrastructure, but from my opinion, I mean, look at the number of bridges, the highways, the connectivity. I remember when I started RateGain, it used to take me about an hour to get to Noida. Now it takes me 25 minutes.
Right.
In terms of even the social setting now, I feel that exposure to lots of cultures in terms of food cuisine,
Yeah.
that's available now. Just overall, I feel like there is a huge international feel to the place. I think the only thing that sucks about Delhi, I'm sure you'd agree, is the pollution.
Yes.
I think I also feel like maybe it was always there, but maybe we are more aware of it.
Yesterday I was checking the AQI. I was, I think, 380 something,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh boy. I mean, there's no getting away from pollution in
Yeah.
Delhi. There's nothing you can do about it. Right.
Absolutely.
And then one thing which I don't know, it sometimes you feel that it's getting better, or sometimes you get a feeling that it's pretty much the same. It's the traffic. There are more roads, there are more bridges, as you were saying. There is metro, there's everything. But despite that, I mean, between here and between GK and wherever we are right now, we've been moving at what, 30, 40 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
So
It's
traffic,
it's time of day as well. We are in
peak traffic hours.
peak traffic hours as well.
Right. So, rate gain, bit of a phenomena because you list in 2021 December,
Yeah.
and we're in 2024 January end, and the stock, I think if I'm not wrong, the stock made a bottom of what, 237 after listing,
Okay.
and last I checked, it was on the other side of 800.
Yeah.
It's in the green today as well as we speak. When you listed the company, is that what you were thinking, that this is what the stock's going to do?
Well, I've been asked this question quite a bit.
Yeah.
The hope is always that the stock will go up because what you want is everyone to benefit. You want all your stakeholders, which is your employees, your investors, to have a good ride in terms of achieving some upside with their investment in time and money. So, what would be the right kind of return is not something that I thought about, but a handsome return is something that I always think about.
Yeah.
So we, for instance, we raised some money through a QIP, a qualified institutional placement,
Right.
just 3 months ago, and that was done at 645 or 643.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad to see that a stock like you mentioned is now, north of 800, and
Yeah.
those investors are already sitting
Yeah.
in a couple of months at 22, 23% returns.
Right.
So it's gratifying.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I feel like the ticker or the, how your stock does is a reflection of the performance of the company.
Right.
And
Which has been great, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, 131% jump in revenue. So, I mean, how much better do you want to do?
yeah, well, I'd be happy if we could continue to sustain
Right.
these growth levels.
Yeah.
But I feel very, very good about where the company is at. And, honestly, I mentioned on one of the TV interviews that agar stock price dekhunga to kaam kab karunga.
Right.
So, really the focus is on,
Yeah.
just going in every day, making a difference, really creating value for our customers, our employees, so that we can continue to drive the company forward. And I feel very good about where we stand fundamentally as a company. So Abhishek, like just 3-4 years ago, we were a 3-product company.
Right.
Now we are 13 products. So over the course of last 3-4 years, we have injected so many seeds and these growth catalysts, and we've not, even scratched the surface with many of them. So we haven't achieved that tipping point from which, we can really, really scale. Because one of the other things I do is I categorize all our products into, 3 categories: adults,
Okay.
which are like mature and are cash cows.
Right.
Then teenagers.
Okay.
There are, products that have attained the product market fit and are showing revenue growth, very good revenue growth, but are not profitable. And then babies.
Right.
So we've seeded many babies
Right.
over the last 2-3 years. Some babies will unfortunately die, but some will, flourish to become great adults.
Right.
And that's what our hope is. And given the trajectory that I see in all those three categories, I feel it's a making of a very good family.
Right. So talk to us about some of these babies, which is of course a question that I could have asked in a very businessy way. What are your future plans? But let's stick to the language that you have come up with. Let's talk about a few of these babies.
Yeah. So one of the babies that I'm extremely excited about is, you're going to hate me for this, but and so might some of the audience, but you know how the prices fluctuate,
Yeah.
and they've been fluctuating quite significantly
Yeah.
over the last sort of 2 years post-COVID,
Yeah.
when it comes to air prices, hotel prices. So you can you can blame us for it, because we built this one product which actually takes demand and supply into consideration, and basis which sets the pricing.
So a bit of a dynamic pricing.
Dynamic pricing, you said it. So one of the things that we do in one of our products is give intelligence on what your competition is doing, and that's usually an input on how you're going to price your product.
Right.
So what we've done is we took that information, we said we'll look at sort of other demand factors, what is the overall demand coming into a city, because we have that data also through acquisitions that we have done.
Right.
And then we look at what is the supply. So we launched this product for car rental franchisee companies, because the way they do their pricing today is, the franchise owner would usually come in the morning, see what is the fleet that he has available, and basis that decide, what the price should be. So it's completely manually driven. So what we have done is automated that process, look at how many cars you have in your fleet available today, and not just for today, but for the next week,
Right.
because most bookings are for a week, and then look at what is the demand, indicators telling us, because we have information on how many people are arriving that's in the city of Delhi, and if we can sort of correlate that data to, the overall demand picture, we can give a sense on, how the pricing should be. So if the demand is very high, it's basically simple economics. If demand is high, supply is low, price your product much higher. So that's why you saw, crazy amount of, price increases, right after COVID, because the demand was very high. There was revenge travel.
Yeah, because everybody wanted to just go out after COVID.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the supply was still constrained.
Right.
Because what happened during COVID is a lot of people quit, and they never came back into the industry.
Right.
So a lot of the operators, hotels, cars, and even airlines were working with constrained supply.
Right.
Because they were not people to operate all the rooms.
Right.
So a hotel would open,
Yeah.
but only would run, with only 50% of capacity.
Right. So that's interesting. But since we have started talking about COVID, how was COVID for RateGain? Because most of your clients in the hospitality sector.
Yeah.
And right after that, of course, you decide to list the company. We will talk about that. But how was COVID for RateGain?
So it was a very testing period for us, because as you mentioned, most of our clients were shut.
Yeah.
And even though we have a business model is quite beautiful, because we have a subscription model. Think of it being very similar to how a Netflix or an Amazon Prime works.
Yeah,
where
except
you
for
pay-
B2B.
Yes, where you pay on a monthly basis to utilize the service. So although we had that and they were not utilizing our service, they were still obligated to pay us. But it was the right compassionate thing to do, is to relax, enforcing those contracts. So we did that, and unfortunately that was a huge hit for us.
Right.
So literally,
You chose not to enforce those contracts. during
exactly. I mean, it was, I think that was a very hard period, just not for our industry, but for humankind.
Right.
I mean, there were people, dying all around us, and they were more compassionate grounds through which one had to operate.
Right.
Right. So I think we employed those compassionate grounds, but unfortunately that did have a
Yeah.
big impact
On the business.
on the business, on the economics, because we were down literally to 10% of our revenue. So if we were making 100 rupees, we were down to 10 rupees, and it was a very hard period because we had to make some difficult choices in terms of decisions around people. We did furloughs. We ultimately had to let go of some people as well, and those are very painful decisions to make. And just the whole environment at that time was a very difficult environment because you were dealing with so many mental health issues, etc. So it was just difficult to even get people, thinking about productivity, etc.
Some point in time, you must have thought about the future of the business because COVID, as you were mentioning, hit everything pretty hard. Your revenues were down to 10% of what you were actually making. Did it ever come to a point where it was a choice between the survival of the company versus sort of, enforcing those contracts that you had in place?
Yeah, so I think it was a difficult period, but the difficulty lasted, I want to say, maybe a couple of months when we had like complete shutdowns. So when things started to open up, we saw some very good recovery, and then there were start-stops because, as new variants came about and we had new level of restrictions. So I think there were a couple of months that were excruciatingly painful. But post that, I think we were, back to the recovery path.
Right.
So we retained back up to 50%, 60%, 70, 80%, and then eventually, went on to even list the company. I think, somehow one of the key...
And it must have been a V-shaped recovery because
yeah.
at the end of pandemic, you decide to list the company.
Yeah. So I should tell you that story as well on how that came about, and I was going to talk to you about how I feel like, somehow threats or times of great difficulty, bring out the best in RateGain and bring out the best in me as well.
Right.
And that's what happened. So we were in the midst of COVID. It was the Delta variant, which was the more,
infectious one.
More infectious one. And, I lost some, people close to me as well as, people in the family, etc. But, so both me and my son, we got infected. Right. And my wife asked us to, actually get out of the house and move to another house that we have, which is in the outskirts. Yeah. So we went to our farmhouse, and both my son and I were staying there and playing cricket as well. Right. And at those times, he came up with this idea of he wanted to relocate to UK and go to boarding school. Okay. Because the schools were shut here, and he felt like, my last 2 years of schooling, and I really want to be out there and be in touch with people and socialize and, have that environment. So he convinced me to move to, UK boarding school. And what struck me is, in this time of great difficulty, he's still thinking of going ahead, right. And he's thinking about his future. And I don't know, that's something that sparked, something came together, stars aligned. And that's when I made the decision that we should go IPO. Right. This was like completely
so counterintuitive.
Yeah, in the midst of COVID, I think we could sort of predict that there is going to be, because everyone was so eager to get out and travel, that we could kind of predict that this revenge travel is going to come back with a vengeance, and we, being in the right place, would be big beneficiaries of that trend. Right. And that's what we've seen. If you look at from an economics standpoint, when we listed the company, we were slightly loss making. That was the only year we made losses. Right. Having started the company so many years ago. Yeah. We listed the company, we were about 300 crores and we were losing money. And today, because of that whole revenge travel, and I think the whole people's attitudes towards travel has changed.
Yeah.
Now we're trending at about 1,000 crores with
Right.
over 200 crores of profit.
Yeah. And that also gets reflected in the market cap, I mean, in the stock pricing. So that's amazing to hear. Your son, as you were mentioning, I mean, his decision to go to UK and continue with his schooling sparked this idea, counterintuitive as it might have been at that point in
Yeah.
time, turned out to be a great success. So congratulations.
Thank you.
With that said, when all of this was happening, you did get some time to sort of spend with family. You did get some time to pursue your interests, and that's what I want to talk to you about now, because we have spoken about
sure.
RateGain at length. And so, what are some key areas of interest for you? Interests which you like to pursue, try and find time, no matter how long, difficult,
Yeah.
or arduous the day has been.
Yeah, so on a daily basis, I do like to put in like an hour of a workout. Sometimes it's just going to the gym or, running or cycling.
Yeah.
I've been a runner for a long, long time.
Right.
So I really enjoy that.
So is this treadmill running, or do you go
No,
to Nehru
I-
Park or someplace else for a jog?
Well, given the pollution, it's really
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
to get out. But when the weather and the air quality levels permit, I like to go outside. That's my more preferred
Yeah.
mode of running. And then if it is how it is right now,
Yeah.
it's usually I would just sort of hit the gym.
Yeah. The reason I asked you about Nehru Park or perhaps City Fort is because if an entrepreneur who's watching the show wants to have that escalator meeting with you for 2
Yeah.
minutes, because you're also an investor,
Yeah.
I'm just giving them clues, dropping hints where to find you.
Find me at Shri Fort.
All right, City Fort it is then.
So on a daily basis, just getting that 1 hour where you get the good dopamine shot, through sweating it out is fun. I'm fond of reading.
Uh-huh.
I actually wanted to show you my books collection in my little den that I have at home.
Right.
So I'm particularly
What
fond
are you
of.
reading these days?
So the Talent Masters.
Okay.
And prior to that, I read a beautiful book by Oprah, The Life You Should Build.
The life you should build.
So yeah, so reading, but something that I'm really, usually I'm very fond of adventure.
Right.
Whether it's jumping out of a plane for
Uh-huh.
skydiving or, going underwater. I like scuba diving, and then I'm planning a trip for skiing.
Right.
So, all the adventure sports, I take fancy to them and ensure every now and then,
Yeah.
periodically I, take a couple of days off
Yeah.
and go pursue that as well.
And having 2 young boys
Yeah.
helps, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and as part of the daily routine,
Yeah.
especially over the weekends, my older one is now in the US,
Right.
but my younger one's here, so I like to play sports with him, whether it's playing squash or basketball.
Yeah.
So, those are some of the, things how I keep myself entertained.
Right. And we have entered Noida. I think we're past peak hours, and we're dropping you off for a board meeting. So I am relieved that the traffic is moving, because
Yes.
it tends to be like stop, bumper to bumper traffic here.
Yeah.
So do you drive?
Occasionally, usually on the weekends.
Uh-huh. But not to work.
No, not to work.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I occasionally will drive to work as well, but lately I've not been driving to work, largely because I've been keeping very busy, and I use the commute time,
Right.
to fire up my laptop and be working.
Okay. And is there a morning routine that you have when you're sitting inside the car? You are a Punjabi, of course.
Yeah.
So there has to be some music connection. And that's what I'm trying to explore with you in the next couple of minutes.
I love music and I love, all genres, but mostly I'm a big fan of Bollywood.
Yeah. Okay.
And but when you asked about like the morning routine, do I sort of, am I into...
Fire up a song in the
Yeah.
car, on
It's
the way to
usually
Noida.
it usually happens in the gym or
Okay.
when I go out for my run.
Yeah.
That I'll put out my Spotify playlist, etc.
Yeah.
But when I'm coming to work,
Yeah.
I'm in the work zone already,
Right.
and I would fire up my laptop. So there's usually calls, or there is so the music dose I get during my workout.
Workouts. The note that I want to, end this interview on is to ask you about things that you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so professionally, I mean, RateGain is pretty much 100% of my DNA, and I really enjoy getting to work and solving for challenges. But our sort of big, hairy, audacious goal for RateGain is to make it the world's #1 travel and hospitality tech company.
All the best.
And that should translate to hopefully over $1 billion in revenue. So that's sort of the North Star professionally that I'm chasing. Personally, I am a student of life, so I love to learn new things and just become better father, better son, better husband, better friend,
Right.
better colleague, and use each day to learn what this life has to offer, because there's so many things that you can learn about. So at a personal level, it is just the pursuit of excellence, of getting better.
Right. And in fact, I am getting a bit greedy now, but this is one thing which I definitely wanted to talk to you about. But I changed my mind when to bring this up, because I met you at your GK house, and I was going to talk to you about your golf links house because I was splashed all over the newspapers last year.
Yeah.
Right. So, were you surprised, by the way, that it made it to the news?
Yeah, I was I was definitely very surprised.
Yeah.
But I feel like so the news is actually old, but it was splashed all over, like literally like few months ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I bought the house almost a year ago,
Yeah.
and I believe somebody.
So you're saying the journalist was sleeping on the job because it took them so long to find out that Mr. Chopra has actually bought a house in
No,
Golf Links?
I think the news did come out, and
Yeah.
it was a tiny, bit news.
Yeah.
But this, like you were saying, it went kind of like viral.
Yeah.
About 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I think it was just related to a story where somebody was profiling me, and how you guys do a very good job, and making it larger than life, etc. So somebody was narrating my story and decided to include the house as a symbol
Right.
of achievement of the success, etc.
But do you think it's a symbol of achievement? Because, I mean, to
No,
a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I mean, there is a huge amount of gratitude to the Almighty for everything that I've received, and everything from here on, seems like a bonus. But at the same time, there is a desire to do more, because not just me, I think a lot of people at RateGain have done financially very well as a result of the stock options, and people could fulfill their dreams of buying their dream car, dream house,
Right.
Send their kids for education, for higher studies. So, I mean, it's very gratifying.
Yeah.
And it's gratifying, yes, for me as well, if I'm able to accomplish some of my personal dreams. I still live in my parents' house.
Right.
So it was about time
Yeah.
that I bought my own place.
Yeah. And make a statement with it while you were doing it. So why not? No, I mean, a lot of people sort of, choose to do that early in their lives, but moving out, that is. But the fact that you're still living with your parents in itself, is symbolic and represents very well that Indian, idea of, kids still staying with their parents after
Yeah.
getting married and having kids. So wonderful. I mean, this has been a pleasure. And as I was telling you earlier, when I was doing the research, looking at, the things to talk to you about, there was not much that I could find on the internet. But after the show, I'm pretty sure if people have questions, all of those questions will be answered, both about RateGain and about your personal life.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank you
great
so
fun
much.
talking to you.
Thank you.